The National Association of Black Journalists has convened in Las Vegas, Nevada, for their first in-person annual conference since COVID-19. The Russia-Ukraine conflict has been one of the leading news stories in all newsrooms across the world, and now a panel will provide first-hand accounts of reporting on the ground in Ukraine during the Russian invasion. During this conference, some of the leading black journalists in the world will gather to discuss accurate reporting on conflict and war during the age of social media. The panel will also provide insight into international reporting for US-based media organizations or international media companies as foreign correspondents. Other topics such as reporting COVID-19, the impact of the Black Lives Matter on media, covering political campaigns, as well as others, will be examined. The conference is expected to run till August the 7th. Our very own Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, will be on a panel entitled Reporting on the Ukraine Conflict and International Affairs. Let's talk now to Maria, who joins us from Las Vegas, where she is attending that conference. Morning to you, Maria. You are the only black journalist working for a news organization outside of the United States that is serving on this Ukraine conflict panel discussion. How does that come across to you?
We are making strides as a media in looking at how the global act on not only the U.S. media, but also the world media. And so it is with great pride and great appreciation of channels that I have this opportunity to be able to serve on this panel to discuss a issue that not only impacts the U.S., but impacts the entire world. And as we know, I've been fortunate to join your show, and that's probably where they've seen me talk how the U.S. is impacted by the Ukraine conflict. And so I know that this panel will be very interesting, and I think that they're looking forward to international news outlets are looking to learn about the Ukrainian conflict from a U.S. perspective, media organizations and to international audiences.
Let's take a look at some background of this gathering itself, the National Association of Black Journalists. I know that this year it's talking about the war in Ukraine, amongst other topics, COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, and so on. But give us a little context within which this association operates in the United States.
This is the largest association of Black journalists, and this is also Hispanic journalists as well. For the past couple of years, the National Association of Black Journalists and the National Association of Hispanic Journalists have come together for the annual conference. And so this is the largest contingency of those groups. There are various chapters throughout the country where in their own states they actually advocate for fair treatment of African American and media journalists of color within the news organization. But also fair and equal access to opportunities in reporting for journalists of color. And
indeed, Maria, we're due a break at this point, Maria, so let's just do that. Let's take a break, and when we return from that break, we'll continue our conversation with you, so don't go anywhere. Maria Bird joining us from Las Vegas in Nevada. But when we come back, and that's after the break, Russian energy giant Gazprom says sanctions are threatening the repair of critical equipment for the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Let's continue our interesting conversation with our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, but who is joining us today from Las Vegas in Nevada, venue of the National Association of Black Journalists annual convention in person. Maria, you were trying to make a point that even though it is the National Association of Black Journalists, it does encompass quite a number of other groups and does deal with a number of subjects that may not be immediately looked at as being immediately directly related to the media. Please conclude that point.
Yeah, so I was just stating that for several years, the Association and the National Association of Hispanic Journalists the annual conference, really looking at how media is impacted by people of color as a whole, not only equal access to reporting jobs and positions, but also fair and equal treatment of how the news is reported on people of color. And so it's a dynamic conference that is full of very interesting topics and panels. And I know that this panel will be one that is going to probably open up a new door, a new venue for really understanding reporting and news outside of the United States, and how, individuals are reporting each and every day on issues that impact the larger global community, but also from a U.S. lens as well.
Let's look at the media reporting of this conflict. That's the war in Ukraine in the United States, and I dare to imagine that that has had quite a bit of impact on what public perceptions and opinions have been about what side the U.S. is on, about what the U.S. should be prepared to do, both to help Ukrainians and to help bring the conflict to an end, and all of that, even though it has had costs for U.S. citizens as well.
Exactly correct. As you and I discussed before, the U.S. has been a leader and really has been the first one. Even before the conflict began, they expected that this conflict would occur, and they expected that Russia was going to invade. And so President Biden has taken this on as kind of his flagship position. And he has gathered and galvanized the rest of the world to support Ukraine in this conflict. And this is one of those, as you talk about and you think through, I'm sure you can remember reporting on various wars that have occurred. This is one that is going to continue to change the landscape of reporting, and specifically, how African Americans have opportunities now to report on the grounds, obviously going right there into Ukraine, and most who have been able to go into Poland right there as that is a NATO area, sanctioned area for Americans. And so this conference will be discussing really how do you report, especially in the day of social media. Things have changed so much. And so when you talk about breaking news and you talk about being able to break that story as it relates to a war, how is that done in this new environment? Not only are we in social media environment, we're also in a post-COVID environment. And so things have changed just tremendously in the media community as we.
Now, before COVID, before the war in Ukraine, and in fact, before all that we've been discussing recently, there had always been those who argued that the media in the United States had an ideological bent in recording or reporting world events, as well as events within the United States. Those who are familiar with U.S. media would talk about ABC and Fox and CNN and all of that, reporting various things from their various angles, ideological positions, being on the right, being on the left. Do you think this has had some level of impact on how the media itself is perceived within the United States? Do people just look at CNN and say, oh, look, we know you're on this side, or look at a Fox and say, well, we know you're on this other side, and therefore everything is a reinforcing pattern for their audiences?
You're exactly correct. And I think, one of the things we'll hopefully get to explore over the next couple of days is really how media outside of the U.S. is very different in some ways than that. And, who watches Fox, individuals who have a very right-wing perspective will tune into Fox. You have others that might occasionally watch Fox, but CNN, you're going to have much more of a liberal, left-wing focused individual that's going to watch that as well. ABC, CBS tend to lean a little bit from most media's perspective to the left. Most Americans who are on the left side will kind of tune into those as well. And so you're exactly correct. I mean, these news outlets has really dictated, who watches what specific channels, shows here in the U.S. You'll also see some like MSNBC. There are a couple of other news outlets that are looking to kind of a little bit more balance. The media has been called on that. And to see some reporting trying to be more balanced, but it definitely has for, the last number of in the for the end of the Kennedy administration, an administration where you really started to see how they were able to get their messaging in their presidential administrations.
Indeed, Maria, of course, we can say that one of the media outlets in the United States that tries to be balanced is Channels Television, for which you work and for which you are being recognized at this event. Congratulations, and do have a good time in Las Vegas, Nevada.